Okay, hi everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. This is Matt Schultz from the Sustainable Phosphorus Alliance, and we're here for the Sustainable Phosphorus webinar series. Today's installment is called Phosphorus Turns 350. I'm sorry, I'm dealing with a bit of technical difficulties on this end, so I'm sorry if this gets a little shaky at the beginning here, but we'll get into it soon enough. Just a few instructions for the webinar. If you could, please remain muted during the webinar with your camera off, and don't try to share your screen with the group. This helps us cut down both on noise and cross-talk, and also reduces our bandwidth that we're using during the webinar. We have a way of addressing questions and answers during the webinar. Zoom, the platform that we're using right now, has a chat box. And you can see a picture of that in this photo, or this picture that I'm showing right now. You can hit the chat button and it pops up a little group chat box, and you can then select to whom you want to send a message. You can send messages to everyone, but I would recommend if you want to send something privately, you can just send it to me. I'm listed as Matthew Schultz. You can type your questions during the webinar at any point into that chat box, and I'll record them. And then at the end of each speaker's presentation, we'll go and address those questions. I'll post the questions that you've typed out into the webinar, and people will be able to see the question, and then our reviewers, our panelists will be able to answer them. A little bit about the Sustainable Phosphorus Alliance. So we are a member-funded organization. We're located at Arizona State University, and we have a great group of members who have been supporting us through the years. We serve as North America's central forum for the sustainable use, recovery, and recycling of phosphorus in the food system. And if you'd like to join the organization or find out more about joining, please contact me after the webinar. And you can do that through our website. We're at phosphorusalliance.org. A little bit about what we do. We facilitate networking across the phosphorus value chain. We have annual conferences on phosphorus sustainability. We have webinars such as this one, and other outreach activities. We orchestrate some research working groups, and provide technical input to other organizations, and represent the phosphorus sustainability community here and abroad. Probably most interesting for you is that we have a nice community resource. We have 24 hours, more than 24 hours of phosphorus sustainability discussions available online, and you can access those through our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and look for Sustainable Phosphorus Alliance, and you can access these videos. This presentation that you're hearing today will also be recorded and put up online, so you'll be able to access it again in the future. That should come online in just a few days. We're also running something called the Phosphorus Sustainability Challenge. So if you're with an organization that's interested in getting some kudos for the work you're doing, advancing the cause of phosphorus sustainability, come check out our challenge website at psustainabilitychallenge.org. It's a place where you can make a public commitment to some aspect of phosphorus sustainability and receive some public recognition for that. And I'm happy to talk to you more about that if you'd like to join. Last announcement, I think, we're having our next Phosphorus Forum, Phosphorus Forum 2020 in Washington, D.C. on April 30th. And so we hope you can join us. We have a great list of speakers, including Dr. Don Bush from University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, Carrie McNamara from OCP, Chris Hornback from NACWA, the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, and a bunch of others. This is being sponsored by OCP and Ostara. We do this every year, and we'd love to have you join us for a great networking event there in DC. So just by way of introduction to the webinar, this is meant to be a birthday party of sorts for our favorite element, phosphorus. So it was German scientist Henning Brand that discovered the element 350 years ago, and we won't really have another excuse to party for another 50 years. So we've put together a panel today to help us celebrate, including the person we've just heard from, Dr. Helen Jarvie from the Center for Ecology and Hydrology in the UK. She'll be discussing the discovery of phosphorus, its many uses, and the sustainability issues connected to it. Then we'll hear from Dr. Rachel Marshall from Lancaster University, who will provide an overview of activities and findings from a recent Phosphorus 350 event that was held in Lancaster recently. And then finally, we'll hear from our own esteemed director, Dr. Jim Elser, and his and our friend and colleague, Dr. Phil Haygarth, as they discuss their recent completed and soon to be published book on phosphorus. So without further ado, Helen, I think we can try to muddle through this together.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt.
Yeah.
So I don't have control of the slides from
Right.
the UK at the moment. We have had a few technical difficulties, but hopefully you can hear me. So as Matt said, 2019 marks the 350th anniversary of the discovery of Phosphorus mirabilis, the miraculous bearer of light. The direct translation is Lucifer, which of course has become a byword for the devil. And owing to the surprising number of ways that phosphorus can kill you, its association with alchemists, human remains, and its method of discovery, it's perhaps not surprising that phosphorus is also known as the devil's element. And today I'd like to start the ball rolling by exploring the vital role that phosphorus has played in society, including both the bright and dark sides of its many uses. And I'd also like to acknowledge my presentation co-authors, Andrew Sharpley from the University of Arkansas, Don Flayton from the University of Manitoba, and Pete Kleinman from the USDA ARS in Pennsylvania. Okay, so thanks, Matt. We're on to the second slide. So phosphorus was discovered by the German alchemist Henrik Brandt in Hamburg, Germany. He was searching for the elusive philosopher's stone believed to transform base metals into gold. Instead, what he found was phosphorus, the element upon which, of course, our very existence depends. Phosphorus was the first element to be discovered chemically. It's so reactive in elemental form that it never occurs free in nature. And its discovery can really only be described as a truly heroic and olfactorially challenging endeavour. It involved boiling up 22 hogsheads, which apparently is around 1,200 gallons of human urine, boiling it down to a thick syrup, which was then distilled in a charcoal furnace. One can only begin to imagine the smell in Brandt's laboratory. After 20 hours, phosphorus would have distilled over and the laboratory suffused with a beautiful blue light for the next 7 to 8 hours. And as Brandt gazed in awe at the eerie blue light emanating from his flask, he could never imagine that this substance would be of far greater direct benefit to humankind than gold, the sustaining human life on Earth. Some 100 years later, this event clearly captured the imagination of the English artists and poets of the Enlightenment, including Erasmus, grandfather of Charles Darwin, who waxed lyrical about phosphorus in poetry, and also the iconic painting, which is the background to this slide, by Joseph Wright, an English landscape and portrait painter. And this painting is now part of the Wright collection at the Derby Museum and Art Gallery in the UK. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so our journey should really begin at least 4.5 billion years ago. Phosphorus is thought to form in the heart of a supernova when stars explode at the end of their lives, but apparently not just any old supernova. And new research, which was published last year, looked deep into space and concluded that the universe is actually substantially lacking in phosphorus, and that the Earth was unusually lucky because it happened to be close enough to the right kind of supernova. So in fact, phosphorus is rare and precious stardust, and the lack of it elsewhere in the universe may mean a greater likelihood that we are indeed alone. Next slide, please. And this is because phosphorus is an essential constituent of all life on Earth, albeit life as we know it. From our genetic code and our DNA to the phospholipids of our cell membranes, to the appetite of bones, and to ATP, the basic currency of all metabolic processes. And of course, we simply cannot grow our food without phosphorus. Next slide, please, Matt. Fertiliser phosphorus, of course, has provided the foundation of all commercial food, fibre and bioenergy production, supporting population growth and facilitating our transition to modern urbanised societies. Back in 1769, phosphorus was identified in bone ash, which became the major phosphorus source for the next century. Reports suggest that bones from the battlefields of Waterloo in 1815 were collected and shipped to England for use as a fertiliser, contributing to England's green and pleasant land. Subsequently, bat and bird guano became a valuable source of phosphorus until the refinement of rock phosphates to produce mineral phosphorus formulations greatly expanded the use and availability and reduced the cost of fertilisers after World War II, resulting in a dramatic increase in fertiliser phosphorus use, as shown in this graph. Next, if you could just press this down once and again, please. Thank you. And with less than 10% of phosphorus in human waste recycled back into the food production system, farmers have become increasingly reliant on mineral phosphorus fertilisers. And of course, we face the prospect of long-term future phosphorus security issues. Phosphorus is a non-renewable resource, and there are concerns about the longevity of phosphorus rock supplies and the fraction that is economically and geopolitically feasible to extract. Next slide, please, Matt. Beyond its primary use as a fertiliser, phosphorus is also used in a plethora of products upon which society has grown to depend upon. For example, phosphoric acid is used in soft drinks to impart tangy and crisp flavour, as an additive to enhance the cleaning power of detergents, until, of course, it was banned following water quality impairment in the Great Lakes in the 60s and 70s, and also as a water conditioner to reduce the risk of lead poisoning in drinking water. Diphosphate leavening agents, diphosphate leavening agents are used to give baked goods their light texture, and polyphosphates are used in cooked meats to make them juicier and more tender, and also as emulsifying agents for processed cheese and toothpastes. Phosphorus is used in matches, originally, of course, the white phosphorus lucifer matches, and then replaced by safety matches, which relied on much less dangerous red phosphorus. Bisphosphonates are used in pharmaceuticals to treat bone wastage and certain types of bone cancer. And organophosphorus compounds have a wide range of applications, from flame retardants and plasticizers to pesticides such as malathion and glyphosate. Next slide, please, Matt. Nonetheless, there's also been a darker side to our phosphorus use. The use of white phosphorus in matches opened up a new world of instant fire, but of course caused the extremely painful phossy jaw amongst factory workers. If ingested, white phosphorus causes severe liver damage, and there are apparently reports of a wife trying to poison her husband by lacing his stew with white phosphorus. The plot was thwarted when the hot stew gave off a luminous steam. Phosphorus is used in incendiaries, smoke screens, tracer bullets, and also as a key component of napalm. It's also used in chemical weapons such as the nerve agents sarin and VX, and also in Novichok, which of course last year was used to poison a former Russian agent in Salisbury in southern England. Next slide, please. Historical successes in redistributing rock phosphate as fertiliser have, of course, enabled modern food and feed production systems. And this really represents a grand societal achievement in overcoming inequality. Moving refined forms of phosphorus from high quality, inexpensive sources has been the foundation of all forms of modern agricultural production systems, helping to sustain dramatic yield increases. However, despite the successes in achieving global phosphorus redistribution, profound inequalities still remain. Phosphorus deficits occur across around 30% of global cropland, and indeed the poverty and food insecurity across the developing world is largely coincident with deficits in agricultural soils, as illustrated by these efforts to quantify phosphorus soil reserves globally. And of course, phosphorus surpluses in North America, Brazil, China, Europe are linked to water quality impairment. Next slide, please, Matt. In the US, to address these imbalances and to optimize food production, the face of agriculture has changed. Mixed livestock and crop farming systems where phosphorus was recycled locally have given way to industrial scale farming, which is reliant on large-scale transfers of phosphorus from mineral reserves to geographically distinct areas of grain and animal production and human consumption. Next slide, please, Matt. Thank you. When areas of phosphorus production, where the sum of the livestock and phosphorus in human waste are juxtaposed with the phosphorus fertilizer demand, as shown here in this graph, some of these inherent difficulties in recycling become apparent because the areas of phosphorus demand in blue for grain production in the Midwest and Mississippi Valley are located hundreds of miles away from the major cities and intensive livestock producing areas where the waste phosphorus is produced. And this, of course, has led to a breakdown in the phosphorus cycle. Could you tap the next forward just once, please, Matt? It's led to a breakdown of the phosphorus cycle, large transfer distances precluding phosphorus recycling back into areas of grain production, and of course increasing our dependence on relatively cheap mineral phosphorus fertilizers, which are drawing upon our non-renewable rock phosphate reserves. Next slide, please. So we're facing a conundrum arising from these simultaneous deficiencies and excesses of phosphorus across local, regional, national scales, leading to water quality impairment, limiting water use, and reducing both water and phosphorus security. Next slide, please. And this has led to increasing occurrence and severity of eutrophication and water quality impairment. And an important example, of course, is the re-eutrophication of Lake Erie in the last decade or so, which has seen an increase in nuisance and toxic algal blooms, which have been linked to increases in soluble phosphorus loads coming in from rivers, particularly in the western Lake Erie basin. And here, as elsewhere, we face really quite an intractable challenge. Because this damaging increase in soluble phosphorus losses actually represents less than 5% of the annual fertilizer phosphorus applications, and really raises a challenge about how we promote sustainable agricultural phosphorus management when the agronomic costs of these phosphorus losses, which are causing water quality problems, is relatively low. Next slide, please. Well, really addressing these challenges will require really a broader societal recognition that phosphorus is a non-renewable resource, an essential component of what is an increasingly fragile nexus or combination of water, bioenergy and food security. And phosphorus really sits and underpins all these major security systems. Could you forward one, please, Matt? And this is leading us to the push for improved soil, land and water management, phosphorus recovery and recycling from waste streams like wastewater sources and animal manures to try and reconnect our broken phosphorus cycle. And a recognition that actually we need wider phosphorus governance right across the entire food system, from farm to fork to wastewater treatment plant. Next slide, please, Matt. Thank you. So just really concluding, at the 350th anniversary of Brandt's discovery of phosphorus, it's clear that society depends increasingly on the continuing availability of phosphorus for a wide range of applications for our everyday lives, both now and into the future. But we face increasingly challenges associated with current patterns of phosphorus deficiency and excesses and the prospect of long-term challenges in phosphorus security. Many of these issues are discussed in greater detail in a special issue of Journal of Environmental Quality, which was published in September. There are 23 papers. It's celebrating the 350th anniversary of discovering phosphorus, for better or worse. So if anyone's interested in following up on this, the special issue would be a really good resource. And I've also listed a couple of other papers from which the presentation is drawn. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks so much, Helen. I think that went almost flawlessly. So,
well, thank you very much for your
despite all the technical difficulties, it worked out great.
Advancing of slides, that was really helpful, Matt.
That's great. We'll go ahead and answer or have some Q&A if you can stick around for a moment, Helen. I just remind people, generally we don't handle the Q&A by having people unmute themselves. We just cut and paste the questions from the chat box in Zoom into a window here so that we can kind of reduce the amount of confusion on the line. So I'll go ahead and read a question that's come in. Let me see here. I think I have to escape here and paste here. So one question that came in is, how will the issue of pea supply and cost vary geographically, such as Europe versus Asia, or North America versus Africa versus South America?
How will the issue of phosphorus supply and cost vary geographically? Well, in terms of supply, of course, there are very limited locations in the world where concentrated and easily exploitable and economically exploitable phosphate rock resources are available. I mean, in fact, in Europe, for example, there's only one very small phosphate rock mine in Finland, and essentially Europe itself is dependent on phosphorus imports. So major resources are in North Africa, in Morocco and the Western Sahara, China, some resources in North America and the like. And so the discrepancy of phosphorus availability and supply geographically across the world is a substantial issue, which of course we don't have for nitrogen, because we can harness nitrogen from the atmosphere anywhere in the world via the Haber-Bosch processes. And so I guess that's the issue of the distribution. We've been very effective at distributing phosphorus in many parts of the world, but there are other parts of the world, particularly in Africa, where cropland is, you saw in the graph, is phosphorus deficient. And so the challenges associated with availability and supply are huge. I'm not an economist, so I don't know an awful lot about the cost of phosphate rock or phosphorus fertilizers internationally, but certainly, that is a big challenge for the future. Hello?
Yep, sorry, I was on mute that whole time. I think probably what we really need is to figure out how to create some more supernovas, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a question, do you know what chemical form the P is in?
It's an organophosphorus compound. I'm not familiar with the chemistry of Novichok myself. But like many organic phosphorus compounds, it's a nerve agent, and there are a number of these compounds that have been used in chemical warfare. Okay.
Hopefully no one's asking that question for nefarious purposes.
Since I live quite close to Salisbury, yes, it might be.
Okay. One more question here. If only 5% of fertilizer P is lost from agricultural fields, what sorts of measures can be taken to provide some kind of cost signal to farmers to reduce P application or apply it more carefully?
Okay, so I should clarify that what I was talking about was the soluble fraction of phosphorus in the Western Lake Erie basin, and the 5% is not representative of the total phosphorus losses from those fields. There's a particular concern about the soluble phosphorus fraction, so I ought to clarify that that's only part of the total phosphorus load. I'm struggling to see that because Yeah.
So the second part of the question is that
they're must green. Okay, so what sort of measures can be taken to provide some cost signal to farmers to reduce phospholipid? Okay, as I say, I'm not an economist. There's a whole raft of beneficial management practices that are available to try and mitigate some of these losses. And depending on where you are in the world, there may be some subsidies for applying some of these agri-environmental measures. And in some cases that does happen as part of agri-environment schemes. In terms of cost, it is, agronomically, it's a small proportion of the cost outlay of the fertilizer. Just thinking about this soluble fraction, and I guess that's something that other people are probably better qualified than me to comment on the economic carrots and sticks of applying economic measures to try and guide farmers into adopting certain types of practices.
Helen, I did it again, and I had myself on mute. We had one more question come in while you were talking, if you wouldn't mind. It is clear that interdisciplinary research is needed. What are the most extreme of disciplines that you've seen come together to tackle specific phosphorus challenges or projects? Okay,
well, I can give a really great and very recent example, because I was over in Germany last week on advisory council for the Leibniz research science campus for phosphorus research, which brings together a very wide range of research institutes and departments at the University of Rostock. And this science campus focuses completely on phosphorus research, and some of the more exciting and unusual collaborations that have come about as part of that endeavour include bringing together plasma physicists and catalysis chemists, along with agricultural phosphorus scientists and some water quality scientists, and some of the work that they're doing there in terms of using phosphorus to improve synthesis of organic compounds and the like, thinking about new ways of recovery and recycling of phosphorus is really very, very novel. And so, yes, I suppose the bringing together plasma physicists, catalysis chemists, the agricultural soils community, water quality, and also the economics, and they have a program there on phosphorus governance too. So I think that's a really great example of some very diverse disciplines coming together to really look at novel solutions for some of the phosphorus challenges that we need to address for the future.
Yeah, that's great. Hopefully we can get something like that going here in the US as well, Helen. Thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your presentation. And we're going to turn it over to Rachel now. I'm going to stop sharing, Rachel, so that you can take over the presentation from here. This is Dr. Rachel Marshall from Lancaster University, who's up next.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Are you able to share there, Rachel?
Just loading up the presentation.
I see you.
Okay, excellent.
Perfect.
So yeah, thank you very much for providing us with this opportunity really to take part in this event and join you from the UK here in Lancaster. Jim and Matt invited me really to give a bit of an overview of this party that we had over here in Lancaster back in October to celebrate the discovery of phosphorus. We had this tagline of Phosphorus 350, celebrating the birthday of phosphorus. The event was co-funded by the 3 organisations that are highlighted here below, and we're really grateful for the support that we received. So the idea for this Phosphorus birthday party was really the brainchild of Helen Jarvie, who you've just heard from there, and Phil Haygarth, who you're going to hear from next. They're in the photo here on the left. I think partly they wanted to have an excuse for a birthday cake, which we did do. This was made by our local bakery, Philbert's, here in Lancaster. But really, they felt it was an opportunity to make the most of this anniversary, to raise awareness of phosphorus, what it's done for us as humanity, and the threats it poses to the environment and food security in the way that we're currently using it, and also to provide a forum for discussing where we go from here. They pulled together a team of people from across Lancaster University, the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and NA Agri-Food. And these events are really a really brilliant team effort between the people highlighted up there in the top right-hand corner. And the events aim to do 2 things. There was 2 events. One was to engage the local community around the life and times of phosphorus through talks, video and artwork. And the second event was to present and reflect on the current state of phosphorus management, and consider what opportunities we have for improving this in the UK, but also learning from others around the world. The event started with an evening of phosphorus stories, and these were held for the public in a city centre location in Lancaster. We had over 100 people attending and a good mix of public and also symposium attendees. And it was a relaxed setting for hearing stories, and we had stories from Helen Jarvie, so she gave the presentation pretty much, I think, what you've just given now to this webinar, just about the history of our relationship with phosphorus. Phil Haygarth presented on his own kind of personal history with phosphorus and where he is at this stage. It's brought him to writing this book and hosting these events. And then we also had a presentation from a water industry representative, James Ayrton. He came from United Utilities, which is our local regional water company, and he gave an insight really into how industry deals with phosphorus. There was also an opportunity to have the premiere of our P350 video that we made for the event. And we titled it Phosphorus, a Local Journey in a Global Cycle. And this is because actually Lancaster has a very local phosphorus story. So the phosphorus rock actually comes in 6 miles down the River Lune at Glasson Dock, and that's what you'll see in that photo there with the boat. So we filmed the phosphorus on its journey from the boat at Glasson to a local farm, whose milk is then used to make ice cream in a local dairy, and then obviously to the water treatment works, which is based just outside Lancaster. The water that leaves these treatment works and any phosphorus that remains in it actually goes back past Glasson Dock, so back past the point where the phosphate rock enters on the boat. The link to the full video is shown there in the left-hand corner. I want to say thanks at this point to Forgebank Films, who did the video, did the filming and produced the film for us, and Shane Rothwell there in the photograph, who was the person who really drove all this work and made it happen, and is also very good at posing with ice creams. One of the really nice elements of this event was our engagement with a local art group. So you might notice here in this photo, there's some artwork set out on the tables in the background. And these were created by a local art group, Morecambe Bay Arts and Crafts Society. This idea was actually instigated by Ali Burkett here at Lancaster University. She approached the local group, and we spent a couple of afternoons with them presenting and chatting to their group about phosphorus, giving them a visual kind of history of phosphorus, to give them some inspiration. And it was actually one of the most rewarding public engagement events and activities I've actually done. They had loads of challenging questions, and they had lots of enthusiasm for the project. They came with lots of ideas and went and did their own research. And they said they went away and chatted to their families and friends about it. They found it really interesting. And they created some really beautiful pieces of work. And so you can see some more of them laid out here. They were displayed at the symposium. And so yeah, I'd like to say thanks at this point for that group for getting involved. The second day was a whole day kind of more traditional phosphorus symposium, looking at a turning point for phosphorus stewardship in the UK and internationally. You probably recognise here your own Jim Elser. He came across to Lancaster and provided one of the keynote talks for the day. He was joined by Paul Withers, who's based here in Lancaster and is the PI on the Refocus project, which you'll hear mention of later. And between them, they gave 2 excellent keynotes which set out the environmental and food security challenges around phosphorus, but also discussed some system approaches for dealing with these. And then we had a number of talks throughout the day, and I've tried to divide these into different themes that we covered to give a bit of a taste of what we did. We had talks from stakeholders, including the Environment Agency, who regulate and monitor pollution in the environment here in the UK, and also got industry perspectives from the water industry, so Wessex Water, and from the fertiliser industry. So CF Fertilisers and George Fisher came and gave us their perspective on how they sell and use and how farmers use phosphorus. We had some talks that looked at phosphorus threats in the environment, and there's lots of good work at CEH and also at Lancaster University in this area. We had talks looking at how to measure phosphorus in the environment in different ways, how to treat polluted waters, and also how phosphorus pollution might change under climate change. The afternoon session had a little bit more of a look at how we use phosphorus as a resource. So we had a talk from John Redhead looking at phosphorus concentrations in our soils across the UK and where we should be applying fertiliser and where we could reduce fertiliser use. And then Lindsay Blake looked at how we can integrate solid waste into the circular economy and how we can recover phosphorus as well as other nutrients more efficiently from our solid waste. We had quite a few nice talks that were actually looking at people and phosphorus as well. And this covered the Refocus project, which I mentioned previously with Chris Lyon, who looked at how they can integrate different types of knowledge from different stakeholders into how we develop interventions and system transformations in phosphorus going forwards. John McGrath, who came over from Belfast, who described how they set up the Irish Nutrient Sustainability Platform over the past couple of years, and how it's going to function to bring together stakeholders from across the phosphorus world. And then we have Will Brownlee, who is also from CEH, and he presented on his work around our phosphorus future. He's working with policymakers here to support progression towards a more sustainable phosphorus future, but also bringing phosphorus into the public and the policy eye through various materials and videos that they're producing. One of the main aims of the event was to capture the expertise that was in that room. There were over 80 participants in the symposium day, many of whom had different perspectives and expertise to contribute. So we ran this activity throughout the day. We introduced it at the start of the day. We asked people to note stuff down as they listened to talks, and then we had a facilitated discussion at the end of the day. The activity is kind of based around this 3 horizons approach, which is shown on this diagram. The lines on this diagram represent the prevalence of an activity or a technology or policy or behaviour over time. The red line, so this is horizon 1, and these are things that we want to see decrease over time. Whilst the green line represents things that we would like to see increase in order to achieve a vision for a more sustainable future. And then the dotted line kind of represents things that will need to potentially increase to make some of these changes occur. Some of these may be retained and others may not work, and others may only be necessary for a short time. And then we asked participants to think about the 5 areas that are highlighted on the diagram in the black boxes. So things such as the present concerns now, 2, the future aspirations, 3, the inspirational practice that exists at present, 4, the essential features to maintain, and then 5 there in the middle, these incremental adjustments and policies and transformational innovations that are needed to get us to that future aspiration. So at the very end of the day, we had this facilitated discussion where we took comments from the room and we put them up on this framework. Unfortunately, I was the note taker, and it's not possible really for anyone else to read what I've written on those post-it notes apart from me. But I've highlighted here a few things that came out from that discussion. So there's this idea that there was a bunch of short-term innovations and actions that we might need to take now, but it's also really important to keep an eye on the longer-term solutions and the bigger kind of systems change that we need to see to transform how we use phosphorus. There was this acknowledgement that we need to maybe shift food production, but also diets. A theme that kept coming up is how the stories around carbon and nitrogen and phosphorus are all very linked, particularly when it comes to diets. So yes, we might need to produce more food, but we also need to eat healthier diets and waste less phosphorus along with carbon, energy, and nitrogen. And then another really common theme that kind of was cutting across both days and was really one of the aims of the public-facing event in particular was this need to connect people with the phosphorus story. Phosphorus is very invisible currently to the public in comparison to things such as carbon and even such as nitrogen. I'm currently analysing these post-it notes and the people's responses, and I'm going to be publishing a report from this, which I'll share via various platforms. So yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Great, Rachel. Thanks so much for the presentation and for organizing this event too. I'm sorry I missed it, but I know Jim had a great time there. If you wouldn't mind unsharing your screen, I can go ahead and take control of the presentation here. Again, if people have questions, feel free to use your chat box in Zoom to send those on to me. And I'll go ahead and post those up here on the screen, which I will do now. Next slide, here we go. So we have one question here. What was the best feedback that you got from the event, Rachel?
People like the cake, and I think people were very interested in the kind of the history and the kind of the pictures around phosphorus in terms of Helen's talk is all quite graphical in this kind of idea that it relates to things that are in your everyday life. One interest, so that was kind of very positive feedback. There was also some, I guess, really useful feedback in terms of people said it was very interesting, but they didn't know what they needed to do. There was no clear ask for them in terms of how can they go away and change their behaviours or their diets and things like that. Because I guess there is some ways you can change your diets, but in some ways the messaging yet isn't as clear as what the public themselves can do about phosphorus.
Yeah, great. And we only have one other question come in, and that was, what was your favorite piece of phosphorus art?
Oh no. I hope there's no one listening, I guess, from the Morecambe Bay Art Society. They were all really good. I was particularly impressed by some wood carvings that someone had done of various kind of river features and how this would be influenced by phosphorus. There was a really nice triptych piece of artwork where they looked at a phosphorus depleted landscape through to a phosphorus drenched landscape as well, and they split it into three different segments. Yeah, they were really nice, and it was a really nice kind of touch for the event, and it also meant that those people came to the public event and they brought people with them, so kind of increased the public awareness of phosphorus in Lancaster and Morecambe.
Yeah, I got some people engaged who wouldn't have been otherwise.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Rachel. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing Jim, and our next presentation is from our own director, Dr. Jim Elser, and he's going to be tag teaming this one with Dr. Phil Haygarth from Lancaster University as well, as they talk about their book that they're publishing. Jim, you want to take over?
Well, actually, it's Phil that's going to be talking first. Yeah, because we're doing a double act here. What we're going to do is we decided it would get too clumsy if we were kind of sharing the screen and then jumping around. So Jim's going to control the slides, and we're doing a tag team. And
just be there, Phil. Here I am. You got it?
I got it. It's all good. Okay, fantastic. So yeah, this is a double act. There we are. This is a reflection really on the past and the future of phosphorus. Jim and I came together a few years ago now, and it's all about this place of thinking about why, where we are with phosphorus. We came together in a book. A book is something different. It enabled us to explore some different ideas. We want to tell you about this in the next few minutes. This is the story of how an oft neglected element supports life on Earth. Oh, he's jumping ahead of me. Okay, so So this is the journey. It's a Phosphorus book collaboration. It gave us a chance to reflect on these changing Earth paradigms. Let's remember for a moment, phosphorus has been around, Earth's been around for 400, only 100 years or so ago did we have a green revolution. We've had water quality issues emerge in the 1970s, and then obviously this awareness of sustainability more recently in the 2000s. So what we want to do here, in a book, it enables you to really think differently, enables you to explore ideas that you can't explore normally in scientific papers, and having this dual authorship thing. You can see some pictures from our experiences of visiting one another over the last 2 or 3 years. It really enables you to go to a slightly different place. So next slide, please, Jim. So here it is, the past and future of phosphorus, hoping to publish by Oxford University Press next year. We've basically got it finished. We've been writing it on a cloud document. The key thing is it's aimed at a general audience. We feel that there's no point in writing a science book here, that we're trying to reach out this hidden element to try and get the story out beyond the scientific fraternity into the smart science reading world, to raise awareness, to get it on the global agenda. And there's the list of you can see on the screen the 10 chapters of the book, the first few of which we really focus on, the story of why it's important, how it features in our life, in our DNA, how it feeds us, how we grow the crops, and then of course how it starts to pollute our earth and the awakening of the sustainability movement. And then we reflect in the latter chapters how we can reduce it, we can recycle it, and we can think some new ideas about how we can postulate a future for sustainability. Let's tell you a little bit more about that and move to the next slide. So over to Jim.
Okay, thanks, Phil. So one inspiration I've taken, and Phil as well, has come recently in the form of a book by Charles Mann called The Wizard and the Prophet. And this was sort of outlined, the main themes of this book were outlined in a nice article in The Atlantic that appeared last year. And in that article, there's a brilliant illustration that's shown here, which traces the whole history of agriculture over time up to the present, and the way that we handle food and the consequences of food production, and the challenges therein, and the emergence of different perspectives on how to move forward to sustain ourselves. So if you look at this diagram, it's pretty clever up here, and they stop at the origin of irrigated agriculture. A long time ago, here we have the appearance and the domestication of animals. The invention of the moldboard plow was a key innovation. Down here, Liebig's law appears. That's kind of a fun one for people who are interested in nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus. Then we have Fritz Haber and Karl Bosch appear on the scene in the invention of the Haber-Bosch reaction, which provided a massive new supply of nitrogen fertilizer. Moving on, here we have sort of the first discussions of organic agriculture and maybe concepts of recycling starting to appear. And then up here, we start to see the dichotomy between those who are concerned about environmental damage or doom, as exemplified by Carl Vogt, who we'll talk about shortly, and those who see a world of abundance in the future in the form of Norman Borlaug. And then here we have the bus leaving to the future. And the question is, where's it going to go? Are we going off into an abyss, or are we going to build, a better future that can sustain us going forward? So kind of a cool article in the Atlantic, and also a very cool book. And one thing it sets up in the book is this dichotomy between two archetypes of people who are called prophets and wizards. Now, prophets are exemplified or personified by William Vaught, who was one of the first sort of environmentalists of the past, and he has proposes or emphasizes that there are limits to growth on all populations, including the human population. He emphasizes and documents the environmental consequences of human expansion, industrialization, and then prophets also emphasize that human action should always be done in harmony with natural processes. The contrast of the prophets are the wizards, and the wizards are personified in the archetype of Norman Borlaug, right, who was considered to be the father of the Green Revolution. Wizards see a world of abundance and opportunity ahead of us, and they see technology and science as being able to provide technological fixes for any problems that arise, and so that things can go forward. Now, Vaught and Borlaug were contemporaries and sort of had a bit of a battle themselves. Of course, Norman Borlaug is the one we remember, really. He won the Nobel Prize. But I think one of the points that comes out of this book by Charles Mann is that this dichotomy between prophets and wizards is still with us, and it's in the form of real tension and sometimes open warfare between those who are wizard-like and see technological innovation going forward, and those who are prophets who see the ancillary damage and the unintended consequences of technological advances. And then here in the middle of this battle, right, as the earth may be suffering in ways it doesn't need to if we had a different way of looking at this problem. So prophets and wizards, we thought, was a good way to sort of lay out the ways that things have, the processes that have brought us to where we are with respect to phosphorus and its impact on and its role in society. So here we are back at this diagram, and it's got a lot of details in it, tremendous amount of cool stuff in it, but what's missing from it is that there's no mention of phosphorus in it at all, and there's barely, I think there's hardly any mention of phosphorus at all in the book, The Wizard and the Prophet itself. And so the question is, what about phosphorus? And so our proposal, right, of the reason to write the book is to say, well, you know, we have to stop ignoring phosphorus, if you will. We need to raise our awareness of it. We need to go further with it and make people appreciate how important it is for our food production, how essential it is, but also how we have to be much more careful with it in how we handle it so it prevents it from damaging the environment. So now we can just kind of walk your way through the book about how we attack this issue. The first 4 chapters are really laying out the essential role of phosphorus, why it's important. For example, when I tell people that they have 1 pound and 1/3 of phosphorus in their body, I get sort of a blank stare. Oftentimes people haven't even thought about it, but I think if you have 1 pound and 1/3 of something in your body, you ought to know more about it and where it came from or what it is. And so chapter 2 is what is phosphorus, discuss about what chemical elements are, where phosphorus fits in the periodic table, how it was produced by supernovas, et cetera, all the physical properties of phosphorus. Chapter 3 deals with the role of phosphorus in biology. You know, phosphorus holds your genes up, it said, right? It's there in your DNA and your RNA and in your energetic nucleotides, ATP, it's in your phospholipids, it's in your bones itself. And therefore we have to eat it, right, to get it into our body where we need it. And so it's in our food. It's essential for our nutrition, and that's exemplified by, you know, for example, when poultry don't get sufficient phosphorus, they have severe health problems. So those are the first 4 chapters talking about the essential, laying the foundation for what phosphorus is and how important it is. And then we'll move it over to Phil and talk about how we get phosphorus into our food in the first place.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So this is phosphorus growing. This is the idea that reminds us of this explosion of interest in phosphorus, the wizardry, if you like, of how phosphorus has contributed to food and growing in agriculture around the world. So here on the bottom right of your slide, again, is a reminder of this, if you like, the explosion of the use of phosphate rock around the time of the Green Revolution, less than 100 years ago. And there is some illustrations of a phosphate rock mine. Those photographs were taken in China. But a little reminder to us all that as we look to the future, that most of those mines are going to be mostly based around Morocco. So actually only a few places in the world are supplying that agriculture, that phosphate rock to take us forward. Next slide, please, Jim. Yeah, but the fundamental thing that we explore, of course, is the great role, this great recognition that started in the 1800s through into the 1900s and in this century, that phosphate rock from all types really does help food production. On the left, there's a stark illustration of it. On the right, there is these, what we call in agriculture, these growth yield response curves. The more P you add up to a point, wonderful things happen with food production. And as you can see in the top left of the slide, pure Borlagian wizardry going on here. Next slide, please, Jim. The idea that wizardry can really help produce food and produce, the phosphorus is producing the food and all the innovation that goes with that. In this chapter 2, we also reflect, actually, we look back historically at the development of phosphorus use in agriculture. We break it very broadly into the 3 stages you can see there. We look back on the early days of hunting and gathering. We talk about the beginnings of agriculture. These stages 1 and 2, they're really times of very low phosphorus use, very sustainable types of historical phosphorus use, leading up to the time of the great expansion in stage 3, which we are living in now, the modern agricultural phase with huge amounts of rock phosphate now in the system. And critically, let me draw your attention to the 4th bullet point on the right there, this idea of legacy phosphorus now accumulating in soils, and the idea of what we're postulating is these fast growing and lazy plants, perhaps a stretch of terminology maybe, but plants which don't really have to work very hard for their phosphorus because we've domesticated them, we've selected plants which are now perhaps getting used to the idea that they're dosed with fertilizer, and something perhaps to think about here in the book. Next slide, please, Jim. So there we have it. That was the development of phosphorus growing, and this chapter 6 now, phosphorus polluting. The idea that just like phosphorus helps crops grow on the land, phosphorus also helps things grow in waterways with very stark, dramatic effects like this algal contamination here of Lake Taihu in China. So we are switching now from the wizardry to the prophets, to the Voigtian prophetry, to looking at the effects now of phosphorus on the wider environment. Next slide, please, Jim. And so actually, this emerged beyond the time of the Green Revolution, this idea that we started to recognize that phosphorus in all types of uses was polluting the waterways. But actually, in this chapter, we reflect on very many positive stories about the cleaning up of phosphorus from the point sources, from detergent use and from sewage use. Really, we reflect and celebrate a success story from the last century. And of course, on the right there, you can say the famous Lake 226 example, what's been called the single most powerful image in the history of limnology, reflecting different uses, inputs to the lakes, demonstrating the stark effects of the contamination or substance input have on them. But this then takes us forward to the other part of it, the kind of emergence of this idea of non-point or diffuse agricultural pollution. And this is what is being called this 21st century wicked problem. The idea that we're hearing now around the cognoscenti, the terminology of the legacy phosphorus, the idea that legacy phosphorus is building up in the earth system, it's building up in the soils, it's building up in the river lake sediments, and consequently what we see in river basins, like this example here, long-term river data from the Thames, the Maumee and the Yangtze, we see a very slow response of the earth system to the leakage of phosphorus out from the agriculture. So in summary, so what's happening, whilst we can clean up the point sources, the sewage and the detergents, the agricultural phosphorus, it's in the system and it's on a very slow journey out towards the rivers and the lakes, and this is the challenge which we're now faced with. Next slide, please. And so consequently, we were faced with this problem as we look forward into this century of this legacy, this cleaning up of diffuse non-point phosphorus water pollution. It's a complex challenge, but we are seeing some success stories now emerging around the world. But we do think there is really still a big opportunity to do things better, an opportunity perhaps to redesign the landscape for sustainable intensive agricultural production, and to think more about how we could optimize the use of phosphorus to reduce this kind of legacy phosphorus agricultural pollution. Next slide, please. But then the problem is, or the concern is, and to really go into deep profits mode here, not only do we have this built up phosphorus in the rivers and the lakes, but we also are now faced with a situation that we're well aware, and evidence is showing, that climate change is actually accelerating the transfer of phosphorus from land into the drainage networks and into the lakes, and perhaps into the ocean margins too. And in fact, some research has shown that by the 2050s, we're going to have a 30% increase if nothing changes, just because of climate change and the changes in rainfall runoff patterns. More phosphorus is going to get washed into the rivers and the lakes. That's not a very sustainable way we want to be in. And in the UK, for one example, we need to have large-scale agricultural changes in the order of 20 to 80% reduction in phosphorus. That is the only way which will offset these potential increases due to climate change. There's some scary things happening there in profit mode. Next slide, please, Jim. And so, actually, perhaps to be slightly doomsayer, perhaps slightly profiteer-like, there are now papers and reflections out there that are talking about not only river and lake issues, but also ocean issues, ocean margin issues, dead zones, issues now of ocean deoxygenation, forecasts, models of the Earth system, like the example shown on the bottom right with Andrew Watson's paper, are talking about potential ocean deoxygenation of the globe related to this acceleration of phosphorus towards the oceans. And in only a few tens of thousands of years, we might be seeing some really quite dramatic problems in the ocean. So actually, let's just think about this 4.5 billion year old Earth. You know, things are happening quite fast around us, and that's where we finish on chapter 6. It's and before we have to try and find some solutions. So over to Jim now to talk about chapter 7 and how we go forward.
Okay, thanks, Phil. So sort of as alarming, if you will, about the pollution problems that have emerged, especially the non-point source pollutions from agricultural production that we're dealing with. We have issues related to supply that people have called attention to, and this was most starkly made apparent during the big 700% price shock of phosphate rock that occurred in 2007 and 2008. And for many of us, and I would say including myself, this was a real wake-up call to the community about about phosphorus and how we might need to be paying more attention to it and thinking about it in different ways. And so this chapter is about the awakening of the global phosphorus sustainability movement. And that awakening is sort of shown in this diagram here, which is a timeline showing the establishment of global around the world of different networks and partnerships and platforms and alliances focusing on the phosphorus sustainability challenge. And you can see that a huge explosion of them following right around that 2007, 2008 event of phosphate rock price increasing. So a lot of members of the community, academic, engineering, science, and also private sector are beginning, and governmental sector are beginning to respond in different ways to the phosphorus sustainability challenge. And that's manifested in all these organizations that have been activated during recent years. So that's chapter 7, talks about that whole process. In chapter 8, we start to discuss the ways that we can respond to meet the phosphorus sustainability challenge. What are we going to do going forward? And chapter 8 focuses on reducing our use of phosphorus to produce our food. And so the idea is that we need both a reduction in our phosphorus use and increased efficiency of phosphorus use in the food system, as well as a recycling strategy. And this chapter 8 deals with the efficiency side of things. You can see that in this diagram here that comes from analysis of Donna Cordell and other colleagues. bunch of things are going to be needed here, including, and these are discussed in the chapter, what are we going to do about population? What population will we have in 2050 or so that we need to feed? There's a discussion about different ways that we can increase the efficiency of crops in using phosphorus, including 4R nutrient strategies that are being promoted by International Plant Nutrition Institute. There are efforts underway to annualize crops, for example, to move away from perennial crops. And then a lot of exciting developments in genetic engineering, especially the CRISPR-Cas9 innovations that are exploding onto the scene right now that can really make a big impact. We also discussed the need to reduce non-human food agriculture, which includes not only meat production, meat consumption, but also agriculture designed to grow, for example, crop-based biofuels, which are a non-trivial part of fertilizer demand. We discussed how to increase phosphorus use efficiency in animal production and feed, in their use of phosphorus in their diets, and then all of the things related to food chain efficiency that brings food to our plate, includes reducing food waste along the supply chain, thinking about reducing the amount of meat in our diets, which would increase the phosphorus efficiency of the food chain. And there's lots of really exciting, cool stuff going on with artificial meat and meat substitutes now. For example, the Impossible Burger from Burger is now available at Burger King. A lot of things going on in that world as well. So that's chapter 8, deals with that side of the equation about what we might be doing to improve efficiency and reduce our use of phosphorus. In chapter 9, we talk about the recycling side of things and the main phosphorus that's available to be recycled is being produced by livestock. And so there's lots of things to be done with manure. Recycling, of course, it's very heavy and hard to transport, therefore it tends to be over-applied locally, so we need to transform that into a more usable form, and there are technologies emerging for that. If we do continue to have levels of food waste, we should be recycling the phosphorus contained in that food waste. And then, of course, there's the phosphorus from our own waste that is being deposited in wastewater treatment plants and then eventually to landfills, and that could of course be recycled. And there's lots of exciting approaches that are being developed there. And then there's all innovations that can be used elsewhere outside of the developed world. In really exciting improvements in sanitation. Bill Gates Foundation sponsored a worldwide competition to reinvent the toilet, and parts of that world's best toilet competition is the recycling of the nutrients contained in human waste for direct benefit of populations. So that's chapter 9. It talks about recycling, and then and then what we do here as well is we try to bring things together toward the end here and ask, are all of these things going to be enough? And so one analysis of this that's appeared in recent times asked that question: what is it going to take to get the phosphorus use by human society back within the safe planetary boundaries for a sustainable biosphere? And this was published in 2018. And essentially what this diagram here is showing is that a whole complement of things is needed to do so. We need to reduce the amount of food waste. We need to have improved technologies for precision agriculture and fertilizer use. We need to do things with our diet, but any one of those things in its own right is not enough. We have to do sort of everything at once to get there, those combination scenarios that are shown in that diagram. Now that seems like a difficult challenge to get all those things to happen at once and happen quickly enough to be able to meet this phosphorus sustainability challenge in the time that's available to us. And it might be a little discouraging, but one thing we do present in this chapter is this analysis about alternative energy and green energy and its adoption in society and the economy. And so what's shown here is a graph of the annual rate of addition of photovoltaic generation capacity globally, and in juxtaposition with the forecasts of that rate of increase by the International Energy Association, which are shown in those skinny skinny lines. And what the International Energy IEA forecast is just essentially says that photovoltaics will be increasing at the same rate over time. But what actually happens is that the rate of photovoltaic uptake increases every year. And that's because the rate of photovoltaic adoption is an exponential process. It's accelerating. And therefore, the rate of transition to a green energy future is happening much more rapidly than even the experts at the International Energy Association agency would predict. And so we would hope a similar thing might happen with all these innovations, whether they be in diet transformation, whether they be in precision agriculture and phosphorus use, whether they be in recycling pathways for phosphorus. They will also spread rapidly once the playing field is prepared for them and once conditions are right for them to be adopted. So how do we get about making that happen? And so the final chapter deals with a little contemplation about how to go forward. We talk about this dichotomy between prophets and wizards, and I think we would not say that we need to do away with either prophets or wizards. We still need them going forward, but we need something beyond them. We propose that what we need is a new type of innovator, so we call him a systems innovator, who operates with a broader view of the entire system and how it works, and is able to do the work and do the innovation on the ground that can take technologies, can take innovation, can innovate systems as well as machines, and can do so in a way that considers their higher level impacts on the environment as well. So these systems innovators we hope are starting to emerge and will be the ones that go forward to advance phosphorus sustainability going forward. So that's the last chapter of the book. We appreciate the time everyone's taking to hear about it today, and we encourage you to watch for it. We hope it'll appear on the shelves or online for purchase during the coming year. So thanks a lot.
Great, thanks a lot, Jim, for that, and Phil for that overview of the book. It looks great, and I can't wait to get a hold of it. Do you have a date when you're thinking it's going to come out? Is it early next year, mid next year?
Don't know, because we're about to send it right this week to the publisher, and then we'll get some feedback on the times. I'm hoping it'll have a 2020 imprint. Okay,
great. Again, we had some questions come in, so I'll go ahead and post that, or post those. This first one came in is, with so many environmental issues competing for attention, how do we cut through the noise and elevate the importance of P sustainability? I guess this could be for either one of you.
Well, go for it, Phil.
Well, I sort of going to agree with the question, but say that's exactly the issue. It's really tough. So this is the problem. Phosphorus is kind of like a hidden thing. We don't have the dramatic image of the plastics leaking to the oceans or something. And this is what we're trying to do with the book. We're trying to reach out and find a way of communicating the story, the wizard and the prophet, the systems innovator. We're it's difficult. So I'm not giving you an answer. I'm saying we're still on it. And phosphorus, it's very difficult for people to see and touch it. You go to the local informed person in the street, and they don't really know about it. So what we're trying to do here is to try and raise that one. But that's the best answer I can give you at the moment, because we're still on it. Jim, maybe you've got a better answer.
Well, I mean, the sort of sad thing is that what often it takes is for a crisis to occur. I think the role of the phosphorus pollution issue has increased tremendously in visibility in the last several years because of the Lake Erie, Toledo, Ohio algae bloom water supply crisis that occurred a few years ago. China had a similar one. I would hope that it doesn't take those kind of contamination water supply situations to bring things up to the level that are required. But I think that, when you look at the coverage that algal blooms are getting in Florida, for example, as it, really interferes with people's style of life and such, it does tend to have that effect. Of course, whether people connect that to phosphorus per se, whether they connect that to phosphorus and where it's coming from, whether they eventually connect that to the practices of agriculture of one kind or the other, or the way the entire food system works, is another issue entirely.
Okay, thank you for those answers. Phil, I think this one is directed to you. What exactly is the threat of lazy plants? Is it that they don't use P as efficiently as they could?
Yeah, exactly that. The idea is the idea that we're exploring in the book, and we've talked to, it's not just a casual reflection. We've been talking with plant scientists about this. Is that plants? A lot of the modern domesticated agricultural plants that have been selected by by plant breeders over the years have really not. They don't really have to work very hard for their phosphorus. So we're kind of glibly calling them lazy, because they just like to suck up the free phosphate which we give them from the rock phosphate fertilizer. But the point is that actually there's a lot of other forms of phosphorus which are now building up in soil, the organic forms of phosphorus, which kind of make up a really high proportion of the phosphorus in soil. And these kind of modern agricultural domesticated strains, they're not very good at kind of breaking up the organic molecules, at putting out the enzymes or the organic acids to break them up. So we might need to think about selecting plants with those properties which are a little bit better at working to get the legacy phosphorus out of the soil too. And this is something we go into in a bit more detail.
Great, that makes a lot of sense. We've got another question here. Oh, that didn't really, yeah, I guess that worked. Phosphate fertilizer is priced closely to the availability and price of sulfuric acid, which is a byproduct from oil refineries. What will happen with phosphate production and price once we switch away from fossil fuels?
Wow, what a question. What a question. That's right. Well, I think, yeah, so, what little I know about phosphate rock production is that, yes, that the phosphoric acid is produced from the phosphate rock by treatment with sulfuric acid. Generally at the mine site, this process takes place. And in Florida, Florida is sort of semi-conveniently located in that it's close to areas of petroleum production in the Gulf of Mexico and that whole area, so that the sulfuric acid can be brought to the mine to be used for this. Now, if and when, hopefully when, we get around to greatly reducing our production of fossil fuels, yes, that's right. So this byproduct of that process, sulfuric acid, will go away. I imagine that then the phosphate rock fertilizer producers will need to pay a higher price for sulfuric acid. And when they start paying that price, then someone will also be figuring out how to make sulfuric acid, either from petroleum-based sources or from other sources. But this is a good example of how complex this system is, and it's also a good demonstration about how we need people cleverer than me to be the systems innovators who can answer this kind of a question.
Yeah.
If I could just add, and this is the kind of thing that will bring it more into focus. So we had the price spike in the past. This kind of thing, sadly, is the kind of thing which will also wake the world up, and it'll force further systems innovation, more wizardry, more, perhaps it'll push things on. But it seems to be that these pinches might force things on, in an uncomfortable way, but that might be how it happens.
Yeah, there was a follow-up comment that the 2008 peak occurred when oil hit over $140 a barrel. I don't know if that was correlative or causal. I've seen other analyses that suggested the price spike had to do with complicated policies in India. I have no idea what the real cause is.
There's quite a list of hypotheses for what caused that price spike. It was around the whole time of all the turbulence related to the economic collapse and global financial crisis at the time. So, I don't know if we'll ever get to the bottom of that, but it happened. It seems to have been a catalyst or a spark of something, right? It changed sort of the way that people started to think about these issues.
Right. Well, thank you both so much for the presentation. And I think that wraps it up for our questions and for our presentations. And thank you for joining us today. We did have one other announcement, which is we'd all invite you to attend Phosphates 2020, which is happening in Paris in March. And if you go to this website, oh, where is it? I thought it was listed on this page, but apparently
Yeah,
it's
it's on
not.
there.
It is. Where am I missing it?
www.
At the bottom, phosphatesconference.com. Thank you. Yeah, you can go and book your ticket to this, and Paris would be a great location for this. Kind of wish I could make it there myself. We'll see. But I hope you can all attend, and thank you for attending this event. And I'd like to thank again our speakers today, put in time to put the presentation together. This again is Matt Schultz from the Sustainable Phosphorus Alliance. Please check us out online and join us if you can. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Goodbye.